Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. We're just past the 100-day mark in the administration of Donald Trump, and the country has survived. The courts, the media, protesters, even sensible elements among congressional Republicans have stymied or worked around some of the worst impulses of our 45th president. President Obama's signature health plan has not been thrown on the scrap heap with nothing to replace it, while stepped-up immigration enforcement has seen deportations of people who appear to pose no credible threat to American society. The worst of Trump's proposals, mass roundups, a mammoth new deportation force, not to mention a wall along the southern border that Mexico is supposed to pay for, have not occurred. The recent agreement to continue funding the government through September did not end funding for Planned Parenthood, did not fund the wall, did not cut taxes massively for the wealthy while pushing the burden down the income chain, did not cut law enforcement support for so-called sanctuary cities like New York, did not cut off subsidies at the heart of keeping Obamacare within reach of those of modest means. All these proposals that targeted what has been a civic consensus have not occurred. But the advent of Trump has still profoundly changed the country, both in tone and substance. His seemingly politically motivated hostility to the science of climate change has led to steps back for moves to create a more sustainable future based on renewable energy. His policies, to the degree one can discern them on education and prisons, champion private entities over public. His propensity for pre-dawn tweets over North Korea or civil liberties or press freedom or health care force administration officials to scramble to try and justify the bizarre comments by a man who seems to know no gear but forward. Revelations of Russia's attempted influence over Trump and his minions during the campaign and beyond hang over his administration like a shroud. And let's just say his grasp of history, whether it concerns Frederick Douglass or Andrew Jackson, would not serve him well in a CUNY social studies curriculum. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? We are joined by 4 New Yorkers who take part in the public debate over the new administration and what it means in particular for our city. David Birdsell is the Dean of the Mark School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College. J.C. Polanco is an attorney and Republican activist who is a former head of the New York City Board of Elections. Bertha Lewis is the founder and president of the Black Institute, and Robert George is a member of the Daily News editorial board who will tell us what it all means. David, you've been watching national and local politics for a long time. We're at the 100-day mark. Give us some context.
Well, let's first just stipulate that 100 days is an arbitrary standard. It begins to get oxygen in the FDR administration in the 1930s, and it really takes wing in John Kennedy's Camelot in the 60s. How much can you get done? So does it really matter if somebody gets something done in 110 days or 200 days versus 100? Probably not, but it does suggest a couple of things, and the frame's out there, and you know the press is going to cover you in those terms. So what kind of momentum can you establish? Can you build a legislative agenda, and can you show that you actually know how to manipulate the levers of power in the Congress? Number 2, it prizes planning. Have you been able to set up a legislative agenda so that you're ready to go on day one? Neither of these things play to Donald Trump's strengths. He doesn't have the momentum. He doesn't have major legislation notched by the 100th day, and that then begins to build doubt about what he can do subsequently.
He hasn't even staffed out his administration.
Well, that's right. You have the fewest appointments confirmed by the Congress in the history of the modern presidency.
Not only
and that makes it hard to do.
Even named.
Even named. That's exactly right.
You've also been looking at politics nationally and locally for a long time.
Yeah, it's very, very different. I served in the I guess it was the 104th Congress. Anyway, with the Gingrich years in the 1990s, and that was a situation where you had Republicans taking over the Congress for the first time in 40 years, and they came in with that agenda of contract with America, things that they were going to get done, voted on. They created their own 100-day agenda, and they got most of those things passed in the House. This is a president who he campaigned in sort of a very ad hoc, improvised fashion, and he seemed to try to transfer that sensibility into government, and the government doesn't quite work that way. He thinks that improvising executive orders is the same as governing, but you had a number of federal judges judges, primarily in the West Coast, that said no, that it doesn't quite work that way. And of course, it took them like 3 or 4 times to try and get Obamacare repeal through, and you know, it is where we are right now.
Bertha, the advent of Trump has also spurred kind of political activism on a level we haven't seen probably since the 1960s and the Vietnam War. Talk to me about that, and do you think that that is sustainable?
Well, you know, people refer now to all of us lefties, say he's the greatest organizer for our side ever. You know, this, when you're an organizer and you got a target, and he's a big, big target, and he makes himself a big target, makes himself grandiose, and this whole sort of resistance movement is very exciting. However, this thing had been brewing prior to Trump's election. Whether it was Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, or even under the Obama administration, people were beginning to say, we've got to take to the streets. I'm happy about it because whether it is the environment or education or economic fairness or immigration, this administration has been a galvanizing force. Now, we're here in New York, and finally, you know, homeboy is coming back to pay us a visit. It's a short visit, but it's a visit nevertheless. So some of us know Mr. Trump, you know, before he was president. We know
when he was basically amusing.
He was, well, you know, I know that people, a lot of people, maybe not all, but a lot of people of color in this town never found him very amusing, never found, you know, we remember the Central Park Five. We remember...
and the call for the death penalty.
All of that.
For crimes they did not commit.
So when people are like, oh my gosh, he's so new. No, this isn't new. But in a way, talking about the 100 days, here's my consternation. I had every day I'm just wondering, what am I going to have to go through for the next 4 years? This is 4 years. And what's happening now with this president, he is still on the campaign trail for 2020.
Well,
Go ahead, Jason.
I think it's interesting. I think you're right, Dean. 100 days is an arbitrary number. But I'm a Republican here in New York City, and I didn't support Donald Trump. I was a never-Trumper, and I didn't vote for him. And today, I'm looking at some of the things, and I feel almost vindicated at times, like, I told you so. And I've been teaching for 17 years. So when I see these historical errors, it just drives me insane. But I try to keep my sanity in check somehow, especially when it comes to Donald Trump in the next 4 years. If you listen to Ms. Lewis, you can think about these next 4 years are going to be a terror, right? If you really just focus on Trump and everything that he says and every tweet that comes out and what you see in the news, I don't know how we're going to survive it just mentally without a breakdown.
Well, no,
but no. And what I mean is the movements, the anger, in my community, in the Hispanic community, there is so much anger towards this guy, and I have to just stop people for a second. Time out. Under President Obama, 26,500 people a month were deported. At the end of the 3 years, we're looking at 3 million deportations. If you think that every one of those deportations was a gang member, MS-13, you are confused. So when I look at the terror that I see in my community about, oh my gosh, ICE is coming through the neighborhood, time out. Nothing has changed as it pertains to ICE except one thing. That now the people with criminal backgrounds like drunk driving, like bad check writing, will be in the crosshairs of ICE people. Now, when we look at the
ICE, meaning the Immigration
Center. So, I mean, we're enforcing the laws. Because we enforce the laws doesn't make it racist. I think some of the things that President Trump said during the campaign would lead me to say, I don't like how you spoke about Mexicans. And I definitely don't agree with that December 2015 ban on Muslims. So I can see why so many New Yorkers are concerned with some of these things. But enforcing the law as you see it now shouldn't be an issue for us to automatically just knee-jerk reaction and claim racism.
Well, it should make you,
in
a sense, to your point, it should make you more aware, because I'm sure there were a lot of Latinos who weren't aware of the high number of deportations that were going on during the Obama years as well. Donald Trump is, and Jeff Sessions in the Department of Justice, they are in a sense administering as they campaigned. I mean, they're fulfilling their promises, and that means that those who are opposing them have to be aware and push back. And as we said, there is a fair amount of pushing back going on.
When there's a very significant change, though, in the tone of the conversation about immigration, I think it's really hard to set that aside. And we're seeing some concrete results of that, not necessarily in increased numbers of deportations, but in fewer people coming to the United States, in fewer people enrolling in our universities, in fewer people looking to stay in the United States after having graduated from our universities. And for those of, speaking within the, and tourism down in New York, and the conversation globally about the United States' role as a magnet for the most talented and ambitious people in the world is changing, and we see that in front of our eyes today. I'm headed to Vietnam next week to talk to our partners and to talk to some of those partners about continuing to have confidence in what their students will experience when they're here in the United States. And these are very real on-the-ground issues that we have to think about, and it speaks to a certain extent of the survivability and the good health of our universities, which is one of our greatest exports, knowledge.
But I do think, and there is a terror level, and thank goodness, because I do think for 8 years, people went to sleep. And Obama was the deporter-in-chief. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I was in Washington, D.C., calling him out. However, we have folks in the cabinet, folks that he has appointed and he's gotten through, which are truly frightening. If Trump doesn't know anything, because, except put a piece of paper in front of me and I'll sign it and it'll be huge. It is those other folks who are making policy. Betsy DeVos on education, I call it now, just as we used to have redlining with banks, predatory lending and subprime loans, we now are moving toward predatory education, subprime schools. With the changing demographics of this country, to have a message that goes out that all people of color hear, which is we are going to clamp down on those immigrants coming into the country, which is an economic issue, by the way.
And to control voting rights.
Control voting rights, suppress voting rights. Then it's almost like trying to hold back and be in denial of the changing demographics. This country is going to be majority-minority, a new majority. And in a way, for me, this is the time to get agitated because this is the huge backlash to what is coming. Part of everyone in his administration, there's this sense of the good old days, and let's go back. And when I hear law and order, that's a dog whistle to me, because I know that the law and order boulder falls more on us. So I'm kind of happy because to me, my grandmother and folks used to say, I'd rather deal with a redneck from the South than this soft bigot from the North. So I like it. Let's bring it. It is
so
not.
Now you now have the best of both worlds.
Well, right. And it's not. And what I'm really proud of is the day after Trump's election. Who took the world? Who took the stage? It was women.
After the inauguration, not after the election.
No,
after the inauguration.
But the women, 55% of white women supported Donald Trump.
Yes, they did.
Women continue to support this man. So we did have an election.
But wait a minute. Just white women ain't all women.
No,
now.
women,
So
no.
Not all women. Hashtag not all women.
I didn't say all women. I said women. continued to support him regardless of this. And we had an election, and the man won. Now I'm in a position, I don't know if you agree with me. I know we were on the other side as people on the right a little bit and not supporting this president, but now he's president. And now we have to support our president. And look, I'm a big believer in what Michelle Obama said.
Give me something to support.
I'll tell you what I mean. Michelle Obama says his success is our success. President Obama says his success is our success. The man that I wrote in, John Kasich, governor of Ohio, he said, I didn't support Donald Trump, but me rooting against Donald Trump is the equivalent, and I'm paraphrasing, is the equivalent of me being on a plane and rooting against the pilot. I mean, we have to get there safely. No. It's true. So we want him to succeed in bringing jobs back. And quite frankly, in the first 100 days, he promised the Keystone Pipeline. We got the Keystone Pipeline. He promised the Dakota Pipeline. We got the Dakota Pipeline. He promised a Supreme Court justice. We got a Supreme Court justice. No, this is facts. Then he says, you know what else? We have to focus on bringing historically black colleges to the White House and see how we can work with them. I didn't say he did anything. I said he's going to start working with them. And who wrote more executive orders in his first 100 days in office? President Obama, within the first couple of weeks, wrote more executive orders than President Trump.
No, that's not true.
In the first 2 weeks, he absolutely did.
Oh, in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, in the first 2 weeks, he absolutely did. I was clear. I was clear. Not the first 100 days. So let's be honest. I mean, a lot of the promises he made, he's kept. There are a lot of things that he needs legislative support with, but we have to be able to root for this success because his success is really our success.
Well, no, I think you have to sort of parse though what you want him to be successful, what you want him to be successful at.
Jobs.
I mean, if you talk on some things like jobs and security, sure. I mean, that's fine. But when he says, you know, he talks about carnage going on in New York and
Chicago.
Well, Chicago, but Chicago is not New York. He and Sessions was saying, New York, because it's not cooperating in quite the way they want with ICE, is contributing to gang violence in New York City, which is not true. Now, is some things going on in Nassau and Suffolk and so forth, but in terms of the facts of New York City, they were incorrect, and they're now talking about taking funds away from New York because they don't quite like the cooperation, which would actually increase the possibility of crime in New York. Those are not the things where you want to say, oh, I hope they succeed there, because they would be doing damage to the security of New York City. But look, fine, if he brings jobs back, security nationwide, sure, fine. God bless him. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on, particularly in some of their tax policies that are coming down the road that would, frankly, can we say, screw over New York State, New York City?
Robert said that.
Healthcare, yeah.
However, it's not just the activist community that's reacted. The kind of official, kind of civic institutions, whether it's the courts or the Republicans in Congress, have said stop. The reason he's written all these executive orders is because he can't get anything through the Congress, and that's a Republican.
Actually, that's not quite. He hasn't even tried to get a lot of stuff through the Congress, with the exception of health care. I mean, he started. He was writing. Well, first of all, I will agree with you. All presidents sign a number of executive orders on day one, day two, and so forth, but few of them sign them on issues of such high consequence as immigration policy, and that's where he's faced some of the largest pushback, because he was overextending himself when he should have gone to the Congress and tried to figure out start helping draft some bills that would get him what he wanted.
Robert, what do you want from him? The law is clear. The law says that if you're here on no, honestly, I don't believe in mass deportations, but the law is clear. If you are here illegally, you are up to get deported. No, it's clear. So when he enforces the law, and he's looking for ways to enforce the law, everybody gets upset.
Well,
if you don't like the law, change the law.
Except that the law was clear to a number of judges, both on the Muslim ban and on the taking money away from cities, which are sanctuary cities. The law was clear to those judges that what he's doing is a vast overreach that he cannot do in an administrative way.
Well, there are a couple of constraints that the law imposes. You cannot, for example...
He's not big on constraints.
Not big on constraints, and some would argue not big on law. But there is in the immigration legislation that governs our approach to immigration at this point a ban on on keeping people out of the country based upon their religious practice. And so here we marry the law with Trump's communicative habits because he lets us know what's on his mind, often at 4 o'clock in the morning via Twitter. And he has said, we want the Muslim ban. We must have the Muslim ban. And this goes on for months in different forms, right? So when the judges in Washington State and Hawaii are looking at these cases and Maryland and asking, is this plausibly targeted toward a religion? They say, yeah, look at what the president is saying about this executive order. And there are other flaws.
They also use that language.
Sanctuary.
Yeah, they also,
and the sanctuary.
It was he's hoist on his own petard.
That's absolutely right. And the very short version of the ability to restrict federal funds, that the court has decided that you can't restrict federal funds when you can, except in areas that are actually implicated in the order.
And the great, by the way, the great irony in that sanctuary city decision was that the Obama appointee in California who ruled against the president actually cited the Supreme Court's decision that knocked down a key part of Obamacare. So it's there's some great irony on all sides on that one.
But listen, I've lived a long time, and here's what makes the hairs on my neck stand up. When you say, well, you broke the law. You broke the law. Now, for 20 years, all we've asked this country to do was to have some sensible, comprehensive immigration reform. I have members of mine that I've been with for years, charged over and over and over again. I've had DACA kids who were the children of teachers recruited here.
Dreamers.
Caribbean dreamers, could not, they aged out while their parents were here, and so now they become automatic criminals. Most of the folks in this country, undocumented, came here on a plane, and it's visa overstays. So rather than get to the problem, rather than fix this system, as we say we're going to fix the VA system or anything else, no. The first thing that we do is demonize folks, and we know he knows exactly what he's saying. But you said give him a chance. What do you got to lose? Give him a chance. Here's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for some real substance. I can't just go with jobs. What kind of jobs? Who's getting those jobs? Where are those jobs coming from? Show me something. Don't talk to me as an African American and then say, I'm going to invite some historically black folks to the White House. Y'all stand up here and be real nice now and take a picture. That is insulting, and that kind of thing is a horror.
As a West Indian immigrant, I was born in Trinidad and came over here when I was 8 years old. I agree that you should be enforcing the law for those against those who are here illegally. But you know this for a fact. The enforcement is very selective. They're more likely. The enforcement is more likely going on people that look like you than, say, Irish bartenders in Astoria. Right. I mean, that's the frustrating part of the immigration question in general.
Robert, this is not Trump's creation. The immigration system is not.
I'm not saying.
And I'm not defending. I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I'm here to try to be objective about what's happening with immigration. I know that you have just given a homily over sanctuary cities as to how funding them is important, et cetera. Funding our city in New York is something that's very important. What I think is also very important to keep our city safe. Now, I don't think that gangs that are comprised of undocumented immigrants are swarming every part of New York City. So I think Attorney General Sessions is wrong. I also think it's wrong for Attorney General Sessions to make those comments he did about Dominicans, my people, in 2006 on the floor of the Senate. So to show some objectivity, I just want to be honest with you, there are things that bother me as well. But when I look at sanctuary cities, you have to remember that we have cities across the country where there are millions of people living illegally. And what does that mean? That means that we don't truly know who they are. We don't. We don't know their background. We don't know where they're from. We don't know what they've done. We don't know, and this is a fact, The overwhelming majority of people that are undocumented are wonderful, hardworking people. Many are my students. I love these people. So if they're watching tonight, I'm not singling you out at all. One of the reasons I couldn't support Donald Trump was because on my birthday, June 16th of 2015, he goes on a microphone, announces his presidency, and says that Mexicans are rapists and murderers. And I said, I cannot deal with this guy.
And some of them are good people.
And some of them are good people. That upset me so much, and I'm not even Mexican, but I knew that he was thinking about me and everyone that looks like me. So I understand. But now it's time for us to look at this guy and say, this guy got elected. And it's important. He got elected. And now we're talking about sanctuary cities as a topic. Sanctuary cities are a place where you can be a person that has committed crimes back home. You could be a gang member back home. You have committed murder. You owe child support. You do all these things. You're sitting there as if nothing happened. And guess who are you victimizing almost exclusively? Other undocumented immigrants. I think it's an abomination for us to look at sanctuary cities and not see the danger behind having people here that we cannot account for. These are the same people that drive drunk and get arrested, and then because New York City politics, they don't get reported to ICE.
The reason why the NYPD has pushes back against the administration on these things is that precisely with what you said. When you have an administration that says we're basically, we are coming after the undocumented there, and we're trying to pressure sanctuary cities. The undocumented people who are living there, they're afraid to rat out the gang member, because they're afraid that if they go to the cops and rat out the gang member, ICE is going to come and collect them too, even though they're doing their
if they're sick, their own civic
duty. That's the problem.
You're romanticizing the girlfriend that has a gang member boyfriend.
I'm not talking about that.
We're talking about the guy the woman that's afraid.
I'm not talking about the older.
We're talking about the harboring a criminal, Robert.
I'm talking about somebody next door who would like to rat out the gang member next door, but she's afraid that if ICE comes by, her kids are going to be wrapped up. That makes it harder for cops to enforce
the essence of Ed Koch's order in the 1980s,
which Rudy Giuliani then did the same thing.
As Rudy Giuliani did, was to not to cooperate. Was you don't want people who have communicable diseases who are undocumented not to go to not to go to a hospital. You don't want undocumented kids not to go to school. You don't want undocumented people not to report crimes. If they feel immigration is a federal issue. It's not New York that controls the borders. It's supposedly the federal government. So to demand that a locality enforce federal law at the expense of social peace in their city. We're a city with hundreds of thousands of people who are undocumented. And, there's a level of humanity and a level of reality that's in play in what New York City's policies are. And I'm not sure what the difference between a gang member from El Salvador or a gang member from a neighborhood of this city are. If they're a criminal, they're a criminal.
No,
and the criminal system should deal with it.
There's a big difference. We know if he's a citizen, who he is and his background. If you're not here and you're here undocumented, we don't know anything about you. We don't even know your real name.
That is not
it's
true.
True.
Don't stop. Stop obfuscating and misleading people. You can, on the one hand, say, we don't know who you are, where you are. So as far as you know, there's no undocumented people. But we do know that there are undocumented people who work every day,
good people,
pay into Social Security, fuel this economy. You can't tell me there's 11 million and then turn around and say you don't know.
Ms. Lewis,
but here's what I would like to do, because this dog whistle of illegal, many of us, everybody in here, at one point, under U.S. law, has been illegal and done something illegal. But here's what I want to ask you. You're a Republican, so you got a little bit more juice than a reprobate such as myself.
Yeah, right.
You're a legend. What would you like to see your Republican president do? Because it is true. We've got 4 years. And this is what I think about every single day. As an organizer, how do I sustain resistance and enthusiasm to turn those into votes? Because that's where it really counts. of people turning out and, you know, electing like decent people, because I got some issues with some Democrats too. But what would you want to see in the next 4 years that maybe you're not a Donald Trump supporter? That's okay. But you could say, as a Republican of color, here's what I need for this president to do.
I'm on the record with this one. I really need this president to apologize to the groups of people he's offended. I think he has to apologize to the Mexican community. He never did. I think he has to apologize to Muslims. He never did. I think those are very important things. And I think he has to change his tone. His tone is awful. His tone is incendiary, it's divisive, and I think you have laws that could be sensible, that we can agree on, that immediately become points of contention.
You want Donald Trump to not be Donald Trump?
No,
I mean, there's nothing,
I want him to change.
There's nothing that he's indicated over the last 2 years that he would do any of those things.
I would like for him to. I would love for him to do that. If he were to do that, it would give him an opportunity for us to come together and have some conversations about things. I'd like for him to, look at my brother's keeper and see how he can work with that program in the inner city. I think those are things that he should do. And if I were advising him, I'd tell him to do those things. And I think the resistance will be a little happier about him, and they'll, a little bit at least, and at least you're going to see a better dialogue. But when it's so divisive the way it is now, even the conversation about 6 countries that are majority Muslim, where President Obama himself said we cannot trust those governments to work with us on visas. If it's President Trump talking about banning travel from there, it automatically becomes a racist argument and dead on arrival. However, if we are open to discussions and stop just demonizing the Muslim people, perhaps we can start a new page. So it's difficult. I hope I answered your question.
David, he's talking about Republican objections to what the president is doing. Republicans in Congress have been basically not directly confronting him, but just saying, you do what you want to do, and we're going to kind of go along our little way here and do the best we can. There's almost a passive resistance to what's going on.
Well, and there's very much of a wait-and-see attitude. So let's ride this stallion as long as it's possible in taking us forward and giving us the opportunity to pass legislation. The question is whether he is providing that opportunity. No major pieces of legislation passed so far. You have a great deal of divergence within the Republican caucus. You see it predominantly in the House, but it's also going to mirror in the Senate at the point that you actually get some legislation out of the House and the Senate is able to take it up. But you have the Freedom Caucus sitting on the right side of the ledger and making it very difficult, Mark Meadows and his team, to try to get anything across. The alternative is to go with the Tuesday group and try to get moderate Republicans to team with relatively conservative Democrats, and that then perhaps gets you some majorities that are sustainable. Does Donald Trump go there? Do you stop trying to appease Mark Meadows? That's going to be an interesting thing to find out. But at the point that the Republicans running for office in 2018, and remember, we're only 18 months away now from another election, they're going to have to make a decision between now and then about whether the Donald Trump brand is something that's going to either return them to office or put him in there for the first time, or whether they need to run away from him. And we've seen sort of indications in both directions within the first phase of the Georgia special election, a candidate saying nothing about Donald Trump, but now seeming to embrace him. In the Kansas special election, Donald Trump winning by over 20 percentage points, narrowing it to 6 in the final analysis. So you've got some real electoral questions just about the viability of candidates who embrace this president.
You also have Steve Schmidt on MSNBC, is a guy who ran McCain's campaign, argues that the Republican Party has become more of a party of identity than the Democrats have even traditionally been, and that it's become a party of grievance, and it's a grievance at the other meaning somebody other than some idealized idealized leave it to beaver community from the
not just white males,
1950s.
White female?
And
the white base.
It's not the kind of country club conservative. It's not an ideological party. It's not an issue-driven party. It's a grievance issue party. I mean, Democrats have been quite guilty of that over the years.
Oh, absolutely.
So, it's kind of a flip.
Yeah, but we got this sort of regression where, listen, I'm of an age in which no matter
you're 35.
I know,
right?
But I'll be 36. No matter how poor you were, how uneducated you were, or what you suffered, if you were a white person, you was better than a Negro. Always, always. And this cry that I hear about, well, you need to go and talk to those Trump voters and talk to those folks in rural America and those white Trump voters. It really distresses me because this is what is being talked about all the time. During the Clinton years, right, there was always talk about we've got to get that suburban hockey mom or, that middle class voter.
Soccer mom, right.
Yeah, hockey mom with a lipstick on a pig.
Playoffs.
Yeah,
anyway,
Sarah Palin's a hockey mom.
it's all the same.
Alaska.
And for me, in my lifetime, as a black woman in America, these things keep coming back over and over and over again. And it's almost like, the demographic shift of this country, which is imminent, somehow or another, we just want to brush that aside, and the frame begins to be people of color from foreign countries, if they're Muslim or if they're illegals, and we're going to start to have this welfare state thing.
But it's not just
what I want to do, but what I want to see, I want to see this. I want to see real concrete things from this president. Right now, here's what he could do. And, call Don and tell him there's $1 trillion in federal pension funds. Those funds are invested, and fund managers invest them. Guess what? Not one single minority or woman fund manager to even manage those pension funds. Minority and women businesses, because you all know here, locally, I have a beef with the mayor as well as the governor, because
is there anybody you don't have a beef with?
Not you, baby, if you show up on time. But I think the thing is that if we're talking about economic growth and having 3%, 4%, what I would like to see the Donald Trump administration, Omarosa in particular,
God help us,
is to actually come up with some concrete policies that really address the economic imbalance. Because here's what I believe. Money and people making money and their real economic position, as well as their perceived economic position, makes a lot of salve to say he's the president, give him a chance. So the first thing that he needs to do, deliver for America of color. And then we can talk about the next 4 years.
I think this is such a challenge for this president. I'm a dean of a policy school. I couldn't agree more that we need concrete policies we could actually assess and try to figure out how much revenue they're going to generate for whom, under what circumstances. But in some respects, this is a profoundly anti-policy presidency. Mm-hmm. He believes in the power of a person himself. As he said on the campaign, things are terrible and I'm the only person who can fix it. And we've seen him...
Who knew health care was so complicated?
Who knew? But we've seen him ricocheting back and forth between and among policy positions, even just these first 100 days on the campaign trail, the various trial balloons that he floated in October about revisions to the immigration policy. I don't think we get that out of this president. But we have no question a profoundly divided America. We have lots of pockets of people suffering economically economically and otherwise, the outstanding and terrifying news that Ann Case and Angus Deaton uncovered last year, that among white Americans 45 to 54 years old, this is the only group of people in the entire world outside of a conflict zone whose mortality rates are rising. You see, and they're largely deaths of despair. They can't get jobs and they're killing themselves with opioids.
And the other aspect of that, is the opioid crisis, and they
absolutely.
Well, now it's an opioid crisis. Before they were junkies and criminals.
Well, no, that's true. The truth is when everybody thought that the drug problem was people that look like us and so forth, it says, oh my God, crack down, crime, blah blah blah. But it says, oh, now we need to get them health, medication, and all this other kind of stuff. But the fact is, those objective numbers, I think, demonstrate that it's not purely the backlash against the changing demographics is certainly a part of the appeal that people had for Trump. But I think the fact that there is an actual crisis going on in certain pockets of white America, in rural areas and so forth, and Trump in his kind of own bizarre way of speaking was in a sense appealing to that frustration.
He was brilliant.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if I may, since we're talking about the political impact of minorities, people that look like us, and you guys, I think it's important to also realize one thing. It's easy to take our vote for granted. I think that it's an elephant in the room that in New York City, Latinos and blacks are going to vote Democratic regularly, almost always. And there are districts here in New York where you can run and you can be the smartest, you have a PhD in policy and had worked in the NAACP and all these things. And if you have an R next to your name, Mickey Mouse will beat you. So we are looking at a real issue in our own communities where we don't even think about the advantageous rationale that exists by considering just splitting your ticket. No. There's nothing sexier for a politician than a voter that splits their ticket. If you look at Long Island has some of the best schools. Do you know what they have out there? They have a Republican assembly member, a Democratic senator, a Republican congressman, a Democratic mayor. And voters begin to ask the question of who's running for office, what are they going to do, and how can they help me? And people vote along those lines as opposed to simply blindly voting Republican or blindly voting Democrat.
We did have a Republican mayor for 20.
No, but and the city changed incredibly.
But I agree with that.
Am I right?
I do agree. We agree completely because you've got to do some critical thinking about parties and who you're voting for and what that person says. Again, I train potential candidates to say, which office are you running for? Mm-hmm. Because your rhetoric cannot be the rhetoric of a state senator when you're running for city council. And also, there used to be, and I think there still are, true moderate Republicans, even
Rockefeller Republicans,
progressive Republicans, even liberal Republicans. And so, but they, within the party, need to be able to blossom, and we need to not be concentrating on voter suppression, but how, if you get more voters into the system, then how do we make sure that people of color have a choice as opposed to getting lost in the Democratic sauce?
I want to go to a question. I think it's also the case, though, that because ideologically people are living in their own media silos. When I was a kid, we had 7 papers or 3 papers, and there were 3 TV networks, and everybody watched the same news. Now everybody watches the news that reinforces them. Yes, ma'am. Tell us your name and your campus, please.
My name is Jermeen. I'm from Queens College, and my question is particularly for Mrs. Lewis. You mentioned both that you're happy that we are on the streets, minorities and women are on the streets, and that you are happy that people are going to the booth. I think the question of the ballot or the bullet is coming back up again. I wanted to know how you think we should address it, if we should be getting off the streets, into the booth, or out the booth, onto the streets. Where do we go?
Or are they mutually exclusive?
No, they're not mutually exclusive. We should be marching toward...
Setting aside the bullet.
Well, let some other people set aside their bullets too, okay? that are in uniform. We need to be marching toward the voting booth. And we need to be knocking down as many obstacles to voting as possible. Here's a radical idea. Suppose in municipal elections, pre-citizens, people who had their green cards, were able to vote in local elections. That would just send people crazy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I disagree with that.
I know you do.
Well, no, I think citizenship should mean something. To saying that, you know, when you act, one of the proudest moments of my life was when I was sworn in as a citizen, because I knew then I was fully engaged in the society. I was able to vote and so forth, and my vote meant something. I think if you are a citizen, having the power of the vote is one of the best aspects of it. I don't think, though, that you should.
So it's okay for someone, you know, who like was convicted, did their time, who is a citizen, to have that precious right taken away from them?
I'm all for criminal justice reform on those kind of things. But that is a different situation. If you've committed a felony, and that's one of the things that's one of the rights you end up losing, and you should have a chance to get it back. But you should also be, if you're going to vote, it should be something that is reserved for citizens.
You know, it's interesting.
Well, otherwise, what makes a difference between a citizen and a non-citizen?
Yeah, well, my ancestors were citizens here, born here, and didn't have the right to vote. And what we're saying is, you go through the process. You want to go through the legal process. You want to contribute to society. I'm not saying you vote for president. I'm not saying you vote for governor. But why can't you vote for city council?
Because
why can't you vote for the mayor?
You're not.
Why can't you talk about municipal?
You could. I want to let him. Then I want to go back to the question. You could vote for school boards.
You used to.
You should be able to.
Yes.
That's right, but not anymore.
The issue is a political one. We know full well where most of the people that are here that are not citizens are going to register and vote. And this is something that's being pushed in places where Democrats have a monopoly in the electoral process. And they know full well that if they if the green card holders in those districts were to be allowed to vote, there'll be a windfall in their column. And that's
of course, on the other side, you have states in which legislatures are crafting ways to keep Black and Latino, meaning likely Democratic voters, off the rolls, kick them off the rolls, make it much harder for people to vote. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I'm Adina Kobaj. I'm from Baruch, and I wanted to say first, as a representative of white women in America, I apologize for Trump's presidency. And I also want to say thank you for, showing us how to have a discussion with opposite views and really showing how we can do that. And my question is, do you think Trump's war with the media and his continuation of using the same rhetoric he had on the campaign is what's continuing the division in our country? So obviously all he has to say is fake news, and his supporters will believe it, and it's a lot harder to reach white suburbia when you have people that are just tuning out of CNN and instead tuning into his Pennsylvania campaign or whatever it is.
Well, I mean,
I think Dina's question is a very good one. I think it's much more than a matter of perpetuating divisions. I think it's undermining the mechanisms that we have to come together. We've got to have something to believe in. If all news is fake, if we do not believe the members of the press, if we do not believe science, if we do not believe the news from government institutions, how do we come together around a shared set of facts, much less a consensus about policy positions? This is very, very important in my view. In 1965, and the Gallup organization has been asking the question I'm about to state since the Eisenhower administration. But in 1965, 78% of Americans trusted government to do the right thing all of the time or most of the time. Today that number is 18%, meaning that 82% of Americans trust government to do the right thing none of the time or only some of the time. And the same kind of numbers, downward trajectory, are true for media, for corporations, for the law, for the presidency, and you've got the Congress at an 8% satisfaction rating in that same poll at this stage. Now, I think the Congress has actually earned that rating, but we need to find out what we can believe in and build up the institutions.
Well,
having the president calling every foul on all houses does not help.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, it's not just the media, of course, that is brought us to that position. I mean, the big difference between 65 and now is, we went through Vietnam, we went through Watergate, Iran-Contra, the 2000 election, all of these kind of things that caused people to realize that our institutions, which previously we'd held in high reverence, failed in major ways. When even the Academy Awards screw up, who can we trust?
Well, as one of the original victims of fake news, when I ran Acorn and was subjected to this unrelenting fake news, James O'Keefe with bogus videos, and just first, and Fox News admitted that we've got to push this to embarrass the mainstream media to pick it up. So, I was a victim of fake news. Lord knows I was on television every night, and I just couldn't bear it. So fake news, we were the canary in the mines, and now we have a fake president. But it goes back to
the legitimate president, Ms. Lewis. I vote for him.
What you were saying about people being in their silos. People, we're in the 21st century. So we better figure out how to deal with 21st century communications and media, because we've had these situations where people were just not discerning; they just believed whatever.
What you're saying, there's a guy who's sitting in the White House now who said that the system is rigged. I'm not sure we're talking about it in the same way that he meant it. Yes, sir.
Different.
My name is Aaron Kane from Queens College, and my question is, what would you say is a realistic best-case scenario for the next 100 days, and what can we do as students and activists to help make that a reality?
I think it's going to be warmer, so maybe rain. I mean, do you see? As we're taping this, the Republicans in the House may have cut some very bizarre deal on the health care bill that may let them to get some Frankenstein kind of a bill through that will
push to the Senate,
screw New York City in particular.
Well, New York State. But I mean, New York State.
But are there ways in which? I mean, do you see things coming together?
Well, one of the interesting things that we've seen in the first 100 days, and this is the sort of the mirror image of the dysfunctionality that the president and the Republican Congress have had, is the unity on the Democratic side. And one of the things that people had said that this was a good possibility, but not a whole lot of people would talk about it at the time, is the fact that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are, to give the devil his due, they are professionals when it comes to negotiation, and basically on the budget. For a minority party, they basically got everything that they wanted.
They ran the table.
In the so-called continuing resolution that's going to keep the government funded through September. That gives Democrats when you can manage to basically keep Barbara Lee, the congresswoman in California, and Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, all basically unified in what your focus is. That's leadership.
That's political skill.
That's political skill, and that's going to keep the Democrats, at least in the Congress, inspired, and that may end up creating a feedback loop with what is still a very energized base.
But what I'd like to see the next 100 days, I'd like to see the Congressional Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus get together and put out policies and now become the talking heads. As much as I admire Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, we need to take this opportunity to expand the Democratic Party, and I think the Hispanic Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus should take the lead.
Yes, ma'am. Tell us your name and your campus, please.
My name's Marin Cahill. I'm from Lehman College, and my question is, I've noticed throughout, like when you said Trump was unable to fill many positions in his administration, my question is, do you think that the fact that he's filling these many positions with friends and family members as opposed to experts, do you think that's contributing to his inability to fill all of these?
Well, I mean, he's, you know, he's also
Jared is basically running everything right now. You know.
Yeah.
Well, he's also demonized.
He's like the jewelry store. Anything that Trump wants, he goes to Jared. You know.
He's also demonizing the career staff that have been there, and these are people who, no matter how upset they are keeping the government running.
Well, and he's not the first to do that. That really began in a serious way in the Reagan administration in the 1980s, where, you know, government is the problem, not the solution,
That's right.
and several other catchphrases. And we've seen the esprit de corps in the federal service go down. And it's important to recognize.
We've also seen resistance among career professionals.
Well, and in some respects, we now, oddly enough, have gotten to the shining moment of the career civil servants. Let's just take firing all of the U.S. attorneys on a single day.
Yeah.
The U.S. attorney in each of those offices is the only political appointee. Everybody else is career. So now all 50 state attorneys are career attorneys, and they're doing a great
The
job.
firing of the U.S. attorneys, though, is basically
traditional.
It's very traditional, but it's not usually a wholesale thing before you name other people.
And it is kind of weird. It is kind of weird, though, when you call
took Janet Reno forever to get
when you
named.
call Pre-Parara and say I'm going to keep I'm keeping you here, and then suddenly turn around and but that was because he was getting.
We have a couple of minutes left. I want to try to get a couple of more questions in. Yes.
Hi, my name is Nestle Talou, and I'm from Baruch College. My question was, a lot of college students believe that, you know, Trump is criticized for his use of Twitter and social media as a way to speak his mind, basically. But a lot of college students believe that he's been successful in speaking to the newer generation that way. So do you believe that there should be a new way to speak out to this new generation and for them to understand the gravity?
Well,
of
it's somebody who
situations?
believes that old age and treachery should triumph over youth and skill. I'm not sure I believe that, but I think that, you know, use of social media is obviously one of the most profound shifts.
Yeah, I think it's not the use. It's not the use of Twitter. I mean, Twitter's great. You can communicate with all these people. It's what he says and how he says it,
And when he says it.
and when and what account. This is a real problem when the President of the United States wants to negotiate with other foreign leaders using Twitter. It's just not, it's not okay. And Jared, or whoever's talking to this guy, says something, this is not a good idea. I think Twitter can be used effectively. And I think you could talk to young people all the time, 24 hours a day if he wants. But making threats on Twitter is something, one of the many things that I would ask him to stop
saying
doing.
that the previous president bugged you, hurry up.
Yeah, you know, I was just going to quickly say, it is interesting. I never thought it was going to be the case where, you know, a 70-year-old president would be, you know, the leading figure in terms of being in social media. So bully for him for doing it. He could be more judicious in what he says and when he says it.
I have time for one more question. Less than a minute left.
Hello, everyone. So far, this has been a very penetrating discussion. My name is Christopher from John Jay College. And my question is, what are some ways that we will see this resistance manifest politically? Do you think that the rise of a progressive left is eventual, especially given that elections are coming up in 2018?
Okay, we only have about 30 seconds left. The question is it a progressive left that'll get elected or a more mainstream Democratic that can reach beyond the ideological limit? I'm going to let you have
pragmatic
the last word.
Progressives will get elected. We will train them. They will come up out of the streets. This is a great place to grow new candidates.
We're basically out of time. I want to thank you all. I think for the next 100 days, I do think it'll become warmer, and I'm not sure what else I can predict. Thank you for being on CUNY Forum.
Hotter
we'll
in the
see you
streets.
next time. Thank you.
There you go.
Thanks.